When I first learned that all of the struggles that I had been dealing with as a child and as an adult was related to this thing called ADHD, when I learned about it, when I got diagnosed, it changed my life in so many ways, for the better, of course. And that would never have happened had I not listened to somebody else's personal story about learning that they had ADHD and just explaining their felt experience. Because the thing that I find so frustrating about ADHD is that it's an invisible struggle. The people around us can't tell that we're struggling, and we don't even know the root of our own struggle until we learn what this disorder actually is. And that is why I think it is so transformative to share our experiences about what it's like to live with ADHD so that people can learn about it and identify it either in themselves or the people they love so that it can be treated and supported, and that person who's dealing with it can grow up and live a great life. So that is why in today's episode, I'm sharing with you my personal story about how I found out I had ADHD and how it impacted me before I even had a name for it. So the video that I'm sharing today is actually an interview that I did with Laura Key, who is the amazing host of the ADHD AHA podcast. So if you are a podcast listener, the first thing I want you to do is grab your phone and open your podcast app and search for the ADHD AHA podcast and put it on your favorites list, because it is chock full of raw personal stories of people's experience learning they had ADHD, that ADHD aha moment, and what they did to take steps to improve their life from there. So this is my personal journey that I'm sharing with you today. And I hope in some small way, by sharing it, I either enlighten you about some aspect of your own ADHD journey or empower you to make changes to live the life that you want to live. So on that note, I want to thank the ADHD AHA podcast for partnering with me on this video. And on that note, let's get into it.
Well, as my listeners know, I like to get started by hearing about your ADHD diagnosis story. Tell us when you were diagnosed and what was going on.
Well, 2020 was going on.
Yeah.
So what happened during 2020 was obviously everybody's life got turned upside down, and any structure that I had or built over my adult life just went out the window. And I was struggling to get anything done. I was struggling emotionally with emotional regulation. I just couldn't cope very well. And around that time, I was listening to a podcast by Chalene Johnson. Not sure if you're familiar with her.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And she also was talking about recently getting diagnosed with ADHD. And, she just happened to share her experience, which was a light bulb moment for me. And I thought, oh my gosh, maybe that's what it is. So I went down a rabbit hole, as one with ADHD does, and started researching it. And I was convinced that I had it. So I, had the privilege of having access to, the appropriate diagnostic testing to go down that route, which I know a lot of people do not. The process took about 3 months. And during that, I just knew in my heart, like before I even got like the final diagnosis, I knew in my heart that was what was going on with me. And I had already signed up for an ADHD coaching program because, you just want to skip the line and dive right into it, right? So I'd been thinking a long time about doing some sort of a coaching certification. But when I put the ADHD and life coaching together, both from understanding that was a career path and also knowing that would be the ideal route for me, it just all sort of came together quite beautifully. So that was the origin story. So that was I can't believe that's almost 4 years ago now. But since then, I've gone through that training, completely changed my career, and not more than that, completely changed my life and my attitude about how I am, how I do best, and, really cultivating the sense of discernment around what works for me and what doesn't, and choosing in that direction. So I don't even recognize the Karen of pre-2020 anymore. It's been a wild ride.
Yeah. Stick with me in 2020 for a minute, though, if you don't mind. I know
Oh,
you
go
say you're
ahead.
not. Yeah, let's hang out in that space that many
Sure.
of us I know are trying to forget, right? But at one point when you were sharing your story, you said that you were just convinced that you had ADHD. Can you give me some specific examples of things that would happen that you're like, this is such an ADHD behavior?
I don't know that it started that way for me. The way it started, it was late 2020. It might even been into 2021 at that point. But I was having a hard time focusing on anything, and my emotions were all over the place. And to be honest, some of this could have been menopausal as well. I was perimenopausal at the time. And after that, hearing that podcast, that was the light bulb that made things click. And then I started getting into that mode of, oh, this is probably ADHD. So it wasn't so much this is such an ADHD thing, because I didn't have that much familiarity with it yet. But I started, as I went down the rabbit hole of research, I started comparing that to everything in my life. And a lot of it was going back to childhood, because in my situation, I believe that my ADHD symptoms were probably at their worst from as early as I can remember to about 16, 17 when I dropped out of high school. And then over time, I built a lot of compensatory methods. So again, I didn't know I had this disorder. And also, I had a big life shift around my early 20s where I moved from being a young adult who didn't move very much and didn't have a lot of great self-care habits. I actually had atrocious health-related habits. And I shifted from that to really embracing fitness, which was not an overnight thing, but it did gradually happen. And the more I got into it, the better I felt. And the better I felt physically, the better I felt emotionally. And the better I felt emotionally and physically, the better that started to have a positive impact on my life. So I went from being not a word of a lie, very much a hot mess, to someone who coped very well, ended up going back to school, finished my high school education, went on to get a degree, an undergrad, and then much later on went on to go do a master's degree. But I look back at young Karen and I had so much compassion for her, where I used to have shame because I used to think that there was something wrong with me, that I couldn't do math. I couldn't tell time till I was like 13. My locker was always a mess. I always forgot things. When I was in grade school, we had, I'm dating myself here. We had these desks where it's like the desk and it was attached to a chair, and everything you had for school from morning till afternoon was in this little shelf underneath the desk. And my shelf was always like a disaster zone. And I look back at all those habits thinking, I was just like a messy kid who couldn't figure anything out and clearly wasn't very smart. And now that I had this knowledge, I could mentally go back in my mind and in my heart and have like a world of compassion for that kid who was doing the best she could with what she had, not knowing, what she was dealing with. And, my parents were, working immigrants. And this was back in the 70s and 80s. ADHD wasn't even really a thing. And of course, both of my parents have passed on now, but I just so desperately wanted in that moment to go back in time and say to my parents, this was the problem. It wasn't me, it was something else. And while it's not curable, it is fixable with the right support. So I'm just so grateful that this has become such a conversation now. Like that little tidbit of knowledge that Chalene Johnson shared changed my life, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing today. Because I get comments every day like, oh my God, you just explained my life experience. And
yeah,
it's an eye opener. So the more we talk about it and the more we normalize it and, share our experiences, the more we're not only going to help adults that are still struggling because they don't know they have it yet, but we're going to be able to help, younger generations really thrive and balance out this expectation that we all have to live this neurotypical life where we don't.
I was wondering if you'd be open to sharing more about dropping out of high school and what was happening there. Yeah.
So a lot of things were happening there. My father had just passed away. My parents, there was a lot of family stuff, right? And my mother came back into the picture of my life where she had not been there for a while. And we did not get along. I was very defiant, as a lot of ADHD teenagers are and can be. A lot of teenagers are, let's just be honest. But we did not get along. And I was doing very poorly at school. I was skipping all the time because in my mind, school was pointless for me because I didn't believe I was smart and I didn't believe I was going to do much with my life academically. And, that was clear to everyone in my family. So my mother's opinion was, well, if you're not going to go to school, then you're going to get a job and start paying rent. And I thought, well, yeah, I'll do that, but I'm not going to, do that and still be, under your roof. So I dropped out of school in grade 11 and just from that point on started working full time and moved out on my own, which in retrospect was probably a good thing because I was forced to learn those compensatory methods. Whereas if I grew up in a different environment, I may not have been forced to really figure things out as fast as I did because it was, feast or famine at that point when you're living on your own and not making much money. So I learned a lot really quickly and had to grow up, which I think helped me during that adult period of my life where I became a lot stronger.
I think you mentioned self-care and health. I think that there's a misconception that ADHD is all about, focusing on your schoolwork and your productivity at work. But there is this work, life, health kind of, it's about the whole person, right? These are skills that we use throughout life. So would you be open to sharing how you were struggling from a health perspective?
Yeah.
That may have been ADHD related?
Sure. Now, I don't know that it's ADHD. Well, it's ADHD related in that my behaviors were impacting my ADHD.
Yeah.
So when I was younger, let's say starting from 15, I started smoking and I was smoking a pack a day for years after that. I became a bartender when I dropped out of school. So I was partying all the time, drinking all the time. I ate at the bar that I worked at, which was a Roadhouse, and it was just kind of salty, maybe not the best
Mozzarella
characters.
sticks.
Oh, no, I was talking about the people, the salty,
I thought you meant
individuals.
The food.
Oh, yeah, no, the food, but you call that one mozzarella sticks and chicken wings and hamburgers and things like that. That was my diet. And I was up all hours of the night and sleeping through the day. I had no structure. I just had to make sure that I showed up for work on time. And that was pretty much it. Like my lifestyle was really bad. And the impact of that was I was terrible at taking care of myself. I was terrible in relationships. And my motivation for getting out of that, I'll be honest, was purely to get attention from boys, right? Like I was at this point, I don't know, 17, 18, 19. And that was my modus operandi. So I thought, I'm tired of being overlooked. So I'm going to work on my appearance. And in doing that, I opened like a door to a whole new experience for myself. It started with throwing on a pair of cheap Keds and, running around the block and getting shin sprints, but doing it again the next day. And it was started very, 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 very small. And the more I felt the impact of it, the more I was excited to keep moving forward. And that completely changed the trajectory of my life.
Wow. Well, good for you. Do your ADHD related challenges feel more difficult or more present if you, for some reason or another, aren't able to exercise or to do your fitness routines?
Oh my gosh, yes. Like today, it's a lot more than just a fitness routine, but every day I have like 5 things. I meditate, just short meditation. I get 10,000 steps, which means that's my non-exercise intended steps, like just walking around the house, taking the dog out, stuff like that. A 20 to 30 minute workout. Oh, a heart coherence meditation. Oh, and a good night's sleep. If I can get all of those things, you wouldn't even know I have ADHD. If my sleep goes off, if I have 7 hours or less, you will immediately see that I have ADHD. And when my sleep is off, then it's like almost like a domino effect of all of the other habits go out the window because I'm not really good at follow through or self-orienting. So it always for me starts with sleep. So fitness is a piece of it, but it's probably not the most important piece of it.
Yeah. And sleep is so important especially for people with ADHD.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like if you don't do one thing, I mean, you mentioned this with the sleep, but if it's anything else, that do you have this all or nothing feeling? Like I'm not going to do anything then? Or
Yeah.
are you able to moderate that?
No, because for me, sleep is emotional regulation. If I don't get enough sleep, that the dysregulation is the root of all of my poor habits, right? That if I don't get a good night's sleep, I'm going to be tired, so I won't want to work out. I'll be unfocused, so I won't want to, first of all, not meditate, but then finish anything that's important or be productive. And at the end of the night, I'm feeling tired and grumpy and disappointed in myself. So I'm going to sit on the couch and eat junk food and drink wine. Like that is the downhill spiral that starts with a night of either poor sleep or not enough sleep, which is, I mean, it's hard, right? Because I don't always have control over whether or not I have a good night's sleep, but I do my best to ensure it happens and, just hope for the best.
Yeah, I very much relate to that. I'm very much relating to the on the couch with junk food and a bottle of wine. Did you say bottle or glass?
It could get there. Well, it starts with the glass. But this is the thing. Like, I think with a lot of clients that come to me that struggle with bad habits, when we dig beneath the surface, you can usually find that at the root of it, there is like one thing that makes, the domino effect happen. And 9 times out of 10, it is sleep. And people can, if they take the time to, like, with curiosity as opposed to shame, go through like, how did this day turn into such a dumpster fire? And if they go, and you probably wouldn't want to say dumpster fire if you're looking at it with curiosity, but like, why is it that today's behavior is not, as appropriate or as fruitful as yesterday's behavior? Why was my state so off today? And if you kind of go back through your day with curiosity rather than shame, you can often find that it's like, oh, it's rooted in, I didn't get a good sleep last night, or I ate something yesterday that upset my stomach, which upset my sleep. And with that level of curiosity, you can find, the domino effect, the trigger that makes things go one way or the other. And for me, knowing that sleep is my trigger, that's why I prioritize it above everything else. That is my full-time job, because without it, I can't do my full-time job.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, looking back with curiosity instead of shame.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Karen, I love talking to ADHD coaches. Anybody who listens to the show knows that I'm obsessed with ADHD coaches. Sorry, that sounds a little creepy. I don't mean it to, but it's always such a good conversation. And I think that deep down is because I need ADHD coaches in my life. I know that you coach a lot of women, only women with ADHD.
No, I've started coaching men as well. As my YouTube channel has grown, I've gotten like equal interest from men. So I do coach men as well, but the predominant amount of clients I get are women.
What kinds of things are you hearing women with ADHD are really struggling with these days?
Oh, like beyond a shadow of a doubt, majority of clients who come to me, the feeling they have is overwhelm, and like there's just so many things to do and not enough time in the day, which underneath that is, I'm not reaching my potential. I'm supposed to be doing all of these things. I look to the left and the right of me, and all of these people around me are doing so much better at life, or at least making it look easy. And meanwhile, I can barely get myself out the front door every day. So it becomes a process of not just unpacking why they're so overwhelmed, but really reflecting back. Here's what you're saying about yourself. Here's all of the expectations that you have of yourself. Is this really realistic? And when they start to break it down and have that non-judgmental conversation with someone else, they start to realize that it's their own executive dysfunction that's getting in the way. Because let's say one of my early clients came to me with a goal list of 44 things that she wanted to accomplish in the next quarter. And when I say 44 things, some of it was, help somebody with their struggling marriage and, start a new business. Like that would be one line item. And what I started to realize in the clients I was taking on and myself, like I am number one for this. One of the biggest executive struggles, the executive function struggles that I think a lot of women deal with is not only that we have all of these things going on and we feel overwhelmed, but it's it's the prioritization skill, right? Like it's being able to look at all of these things and seeing what's important and not important. And when you don't have that ability to discern in the moment that this is important, but this can wait, and this is worth stressing out about, but all of these other things are not, then it becomes incredibly overwhelming. And you think all the things need to be done right away and they're all equally important. And no wonder you can't move forward on them. So it's a process of pulling that apart and building those muscles of discernment to realize what's truly important and what's not important or can wait.
What reaction do you get from your clients when you explain the ADHD tax to them? Is that something you do? I'm assuming that's something that you do.
I don't know that I necessarily explain it as ADHD tax, but I definitely see it.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So it's an interesting thing. And I think I can't tell you how many ways I have been overtaxed because of my ADHD. Starting as a young kid who was cross-eyed for a long time, and I was constantly losing my glasses to the point where my mother made me wear like a big, thick strap around the back of my head to keep my glasses on my face. That was a tax she absorbed. I had to deal with the emotional tax of that. But it started there, right? Like you lose things, you forget things, you pay fines because you don't follow through with a parking ticket or anything like that. And then it grows from there, right? Like the additional support that you need or the underemployment that you experience when, maybe you're not properly supported or diagnosed, or also, the multiple interests that we have, right? Like I'm constantly investing in things that have a momentary interest for me and then they go away. Now, I try very hard to manage that now, but for a long time, I would just buy stuff that accumulated, and that in of itself was a master undertaking to control. So it's a thing.
How do you manage that now? What was your secret?
Okay, so this is going to be a bit of a life lesson. So it's going to be a big answer, but the most important thing to me, the thing that motivates me intrinsically, not extrinsically, so not like shiny objects, is freedom of time and resources. So when I have autonomy over what I do and when, like I feel at peace, and peace is a big thing for me. So I never felt that in my day job for, my entire corporate career, because I was never doing something that I was truly inherently interested in. I was doing things to pay the bills and keep a roof over my head. And in 2017, on the way home from work one night, I listened to a Tim Ferriss podcast. And the whole conversation was around looking at money in a different way. Like the money in your pocket, your dollars, are an army of employees that can work for you, or they can be the employees that go out to the Gap and become a sweater that you never wear, right? Like I got home, like I completely lost my mind, and I was like, honey, we're going to retire early. And I completely changed my life, the way I spent money. I became a minimalist to the degree that I could. I call it messy minimalism, because you think about minimalism as this austere and organized lifestyle, which is not mine. But I became a messy minimalist. I got rid of things that just didn't mean anything to me anymore. And that took me down a course of, creating boundaries. This was pre-diagnosis, but I knew I had this propensity to buy things I didn't need. And I knew where they came from. The triggers came from my email list when all of my favorite retailers would say, hey, there's a sale this weekend. And I would buy things I didn't need. So, I combed through my email, and I didn't have Amazon like as an app on my phone anymore. And I did all of these small things that were external triggers that eliminated that instant spark to buy or get something I didn't need. And as I was able to manipulate my environment to manipulate my behavior in a positive way, it really did move the dial. I know it sounds kind of simplistic, but that's where, the answer.
I wasn't thinking that at all, Karen.
Oh, really?
I was thinking like, oh my gosh, how, like, I want to do this. And I was actually starting to feel a little bit overwhelmed. Like, I want to do this.
Oh,
I want to do all of this.
And then get excited about money and finance. Like that took me down a rabbit hole of personal finance, and get an app on your phone where you can track your personal wealth or your personal debt. But, to see momentum, for me anyways, is a huge motivator. And then to have that why, I wanted to not have to work for anyone I didn't like or do things I didn't like ever again, because that's really hard for an ADHD. It's hard for anyone. But when you have an interest-driven brain, forcing yourself to do things you don't want to do day after day after day, it's like like a death by a thousand cuts, right? So for me, it was a
right.
huge motivation. And I mean, I'm very privileged to say that I'm in a position of financial independence now. I do everything today because I'm passionate about it, not necessarily because, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. And I have so much peace in my life because of that.
That's amazing. By the way, I'm really pumped up over here. You can't totally
Good.
tell, maybe. What are some of the simple things that you coach your clients to do that are such a game changer? I mean, I'm hearing this about like finding out what intrinsically motivates you, like what's really important to you.
Mhm.
What about in the day-to-day? What are some simple changes that have been kind of mind-blowing for some of your clients?
Okay. So planning is this very grounding process of sitting down at the top of the week to truly understand, what you need to get done in that week to move you towards, the life you want rather than the life you don't want, right? So planning your week, doing a weekly review so that you can look at what you accomplished the week before and again, reinforce that you are somebody who does important things and that you follow through with things. And it really helps build that muscle of discernment that I was talking about of what's most important this week, especially if you're someone who struggles with overwhelm because you want to do all the things all the time. To sit down and try and plug all of those things into your calendar, you start to realize, I probably can't do all of this stuff. And then time measuring. So a lot of issues with my clients is, again, wanting to do too many things. And what they realize is with ADHDers, we struggle with the passage of time, right? So we have to externalize that muscle of time management with alarms or timers or anything like that. But start with all of the things that you have to do in your day, the big rocks or the non-negotiables, like getting your kids out of bed and getting to school, time them. See how long it takes from you to wake up to getting your kids out the front door. You might think it takes 30 minutes, but it probably takes, an hour and a half. And when you start to realize that
It does.
It does.
You're right. It's an hour and a half.
and then as you start to realize how long things actually take, then you realize how much time of your day is already spoken for by the non-negotiables in your life. And then you've got like the priorities that you want to grow in your life. And you realize time is precious and I may only have like an hour or two a day to, dedicate to the things that are most important to me. And once you realize that, then you build that muscle of discernment, you get very clear on what you can do and can't do, and you start saying no more often because we are infamous for we're good people. And we're people pleasers and we want to say yes to all the things and help all the people and go all the places, but we just can't. So that tangible practice of planning and timing how long things in your day-to-day life takes can be incredibly eye-opening to realize how little time you have. And that can really help you hone in on what's most important and what you do want to spend your precious free time focused on.
I have been taking notes. If you've heard me typing, just FYI, I've got it. I've got them highlighted in my little document here. I'm feeling like I want to go sit and just think and process all of these great tidbits that you've provided. And they're more than just tidbits, it's really, you're doing a lot of really important deep work.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate that, Karen. Where can our listeners find you?
Well, if you are a YouTube watcher, then I would love for you to come find me there. And you can also, if you're a podcast person, like you mentioned at the top of the show, my podcast it's the ADHD Friendly Show, and jump on my newsletter because if I'm ever doing workshops or anything like that, people on my newsletter will be the first to know about that. So that's where I share all of the content that I build out every week as well.
Oh, and Karen, one more really quick question. I know that we need to go, but I've been meaning to ask you. Tell me about the top knot, the hairstyle in the thumbnail of your podcast.
Oh, that's so funny. That's actually just stock photography, and
okay.
I found that one day. First of all, it's a pink background, and I love pink. But the top knot to me is just so symbolic of get your hair up in a messy bun, throw on some lipstick and get her done, or lip gloss, whatever you want. It just, to me, it's symbolic. It's like a lexicon of we're just going to put our hair up and we're going to get this done. So
love it. That's how I interpreted it.
Exactly.
The messy bun. Yeah. Okay.
Messy bun, get it done.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for being here today, Karen.
My
Everybody
pleasure.
check out all of Karen's great work. And yeah, thanks. It's been really lovely.
Oh, I so appreciate being on, and I appreciate your time. Thank you as well.
You've been listening to ADHD AHA from the Understood Podcast Network. You can listen and subscribe to ADHD AHA on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. And if you like what you heard today, tell someone about the show. We rely on listeners like you to reach and support more people. And if you want to share your own AHA moment, email us at adhdaha@understood.org. I'd love to hear from you. You can go to u.org/ADHDAHA to find details on each episode and related resources. That's the letter U as in understood.org/ADHDAHA. Understood is a nonprofit and social impact organization. We have no affiliation with pharmaceutical companies. Learn more at understood.org/mission. ADHD AHA is produced by Jessamine Molly. Say hi, Jessamine.
Hi, everyone.
Justin D. Wright created our music. Seth Melnick and Brianna Berry are our production directors. Scott Koshier is our creative director. And I'm your host, Laura Key, editorial director at Understood. Thanks so much for listening.